I was just beginning to enjoy the freedom and promise of summer vacation. Living pretty much as a free spirit, unbothered and unencumbered by the rules set by others. I was making my way through life as a child of the street. Although I continued lodging with the Watkins family, no one took particular note of my presence or activities. My parents were pretty much okay with just about everything I did. They set the bar pretty low. Their attitude was, as long as it didn't involve the authorities or make the papers, no questions were going to be asked. Every day, I felt less like part of the family and more like the countless cousins who wandered in and out and stayed with us briefly as they waited for their papers to clear to make their migration to the north permanent. My mom and dad worked in factories, she on the day shift and he on the night. They claimed they worked that way so that someone would always be home to take care of the children, and maybe that was true. I didn't see all that much evidence in my life of being taken care of, unless ignoring a child completely was a form of parenting that I wasn't aware of. Mom would get up about 5 o'clock in the morning and leave the house about 7:30. And in between, she would wake us up several times to remind us of the important things we had to do during the day. Dad got home about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Dad got home about 1 o'clock in the morning, slept late, getting up just in time to feed us his famous breakfast, made from flour and water pancakes with a delicious side made from scratch with sugar and boiling water. He called it breakfast. We all called it breakfast. He spent the morning doing his chores around the apartment building in his role as janitor, only taking a break long enough to prepare lunch for us, which consisted of Campbell's condensed tomato soup with just the right amount of water, 3 cans. When I complained to Dad about the soup being too thick to drink and too thin to eat, he would hand me the can, point to the instructions on the label, and say that he was only following the recipe. Dad hardly ever made conversation with me, responding to most of my inquiries and attempts to engage him with my humor with monosyllabic responses, usually involving his catchphrase, "Boy." Maybe he carried on conversation with the other kids, as my brother Paul claims, but I never really noticed or observed that. Maybe Dad had difficulty in talking to me because I wasn't exactly what he had expected as a second son, or third son, or any son. Or it may have been as his younger brother, Uncle Frank, told me later in life. The way they were raised, men had little to do with and no responsibility when it came to matters involving the children. That might be one of the things I would have talked to Dad about if he hadn't died while I was away serving a 2-year mission for the Mormon Church in England. But by the time we were finished with lunch and headed back to school, Dad took off for his full-time job at the plastic factory. By the time we were finished with lunch and headed back to school, Dad took off for his second full-time job, the one in the plastic factory. When we arrived home from school, it was to an empty house because Mom was still at work, and she wouldn't arrive home until around 5:30 or 6 in the evening. We didn't know it at the time, but we were part of the original generation of latchkey children. Mom actually got off work about 4 o'clock, but it took her about an hour and a half to get home because she had to travel across town, take 2 or 3 buses through Chicago's rush hour traffic. We were doing about as well as the family, that is our family, was ever going to do financially during the time I was growing up in the big building, because we were living rent-free, the result of Dad being the janitor of the building and Mom the manager who took care of keeping the apartments rented and collecting the rent. In addition to that responsibility, my mom worked full-time at a factory making bathroom scales, and my dad, in addition to his 2 full-time jobs, had another part-time job at a second plastic factory. In spite of that, there never seemed to be any disposable income. That is, money that we kids were made. In spite of that, there never seemed to be any disposable income. And any money that we kids had was mostly contributed directly to the family fund. In spite of that, there never seemed to be any disposable income. And any money that we kids made was mostly contributed directly to the family's overall fund. When Mom arrived home in the evening, she was usually absently spent from her day of working in the factory. She spent most evenings in a smoker's haze lying on the couch in front of the TV. Most nights, she removed herself to the bedroom by 8 or 9 o'clock. The explosive nature of my mother's mental state was not helped by maintaining a schedule that drained her of all of her energy. Usually you could tell when Mom was getting ready to have an event, but not always. Sometimes they came without warning. For me, the goal on most evenings was to do whatever was necessary to survive without actually engaging her. It was obvious to anyone who took the time to observe, and even as a 12-year-old, I knew she had some kind of problem. I just didn't have the experience or knowledge to understand the nature or the extent of the problem.